Two Canadian pilots are dead after a runway collision at LaGuardia. And for a lot of Canadians, this is not just another tragic headline out of the United States. It feels like one more warning sign from a country asking the world to trust a system that looks more chaotic by the week.
Because this is not happening in isolation. Airports are under strain, ICE is in the terminals, government shutdown is in chaos. And a president who talks about Canada like we are property one day and then shrugs off dead Canadians the next. At some point, people have to stop asking whether the trip is worth the deal and start asking whether it's worth the risk.
And that's where this story gets actually bigger. Canada sends roughly 30 million visitors to the United States every year and pumps billions of dollars into their economy. So, if Canadians start pulling back, not out of anger alone, but out of distrust, what does that do to the country that Trump is busy making harder to visit?
So today, we're asking a simple question. Not, should we feel comfortable? We're way past that. The question is, what happens when one of America's biggest tourism lifelines starts pulling away? Canada sent 20.4 million visits to the United States in 2024 and spent more than $20 billion there and helped support about 140,000 American jobs. And now, those numbers are moving down.
And they're moving down for a reason. Canadians aren't pulling back because of one headline or one bad week. They're pulling back because trust in the American system is breaking down more and more each day.
And that is what makes this story so disturbing. This wasn't some freak event out of nowhere. It happened inside an airport system that has been stretched, understaffed, and stressed for months by repeated government shutdown chaos. People keep showing up, people keep doing the job, and they keep holding the system together until one mistake slips through and then the cost is measured in lives.
Now, the investigation is still underway. The NTSB has the recorders. Canadian investigators are involved. But the early picture is grim. Audio suggests a controller cleared a truck onto the runway, then panicked, tried to stop it, and later said, "I messed up."
And what did Trump do after two Canadian pilots were killed on an American runway? Not, "Our hearts are with the families," not, "We owe them answers." He said, "Terrible. They made a mistake. It's a dangerous business."
And that tells you something about the leadership style here, right? Even when people are dead, the response is cold, transactional, and weirdly detached. There's no humanity, there's no comfort, just a quick line and then straight back to enforcement and optics.
Since Trump returned to office in January 2025, the U.S. has already seen a deadly mid-air collision near Reagan Airport that killed 67 people, a medical jet crash in Philadelphia that killed 7, a commuter plane crash in Alaska that killed 10, and now this crash at LaGuardia that killed 2 Canadian pilots. At some point, this stops feeling like random bad luck and starts feeling like a system that people no longer trust.
And this is where the story stops being about one crash and starts being about the system that surrounds it.
The Department of Homeland Security funding fight has dragged on. TSA staff has been working without pay, absentee rates have climbed through the roof, and the Trump administration has started deploying ICE officers into airports to deal with the mess.
And for Canadian viewers, that's where this stops being American domestic politics and starts being our problem. Because when you fly to the US or even over the US, you do not enter a separate little bubble called vacation. You enter their system, their shutdowns, their staffing failures, their enforcement mindset. Once you are in that airport, all of it becomes your problem too.
And what is Trump's answer to the problem? It's not, well, let's end the shutdown and pay airport workers. It was to send immigration agents into airports. Now, the mood inside American airports was already toxic. Workers were unpaid, exhausted, and they were calling out what was going on. Others were quitting, airports were warning travelers to show up at least 4 hours early, and even airport leaders were begging Congress to end the standoff.
So when ICE officers were deployed to 14 airports and Trump himself said they could make arrests there, even while claiming that was not the main reason that they were present, well, that is a hell of a travel vibe, man.
And that is the mentality Canadians are being asked to trust when they travel south.
It's crazy. Even the TSA union was basically saying this is completely backwards. Their people deserve to be paid, not replaced by armed agents who are not trained for that job. That's not fixing the airport. That's turning the airport into a political prop.
And this is what makes the ICE angle so insane. This isn't some neutral customer service agency being brought in to calm a tense situation. This is the same enforcement machine that people associate with raids, detention, deaths, violent crackdown, and deportation into a system in El Salvador that human rights groups say is disappearing people. And now we're supposed to believe that their presence makes the airport feel safer?
I don't think so. Look, airports are already stressful enough. Families are rushing around, people are missing flights, kids are melting down, and staff is already stretched thin. And then the answer from Washington is to put those ICE agents into an environment and call it reassurance. That's not reassurance, people. That's imposing fear.
And here is where the Trump administration doesn't seem to grasp anything. Or maybe they do. You cannot spend a year turning ICE into the public face of fear, raids, and massed force, then suddenly park that same agency in an airport and expect international travelers to feel welcome.
Which brings us to the next absurdity. The United States is about to co-host the 2026 World Cup and then stage the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. So this is the same country that is asking the world to come celebrate football and sport, while lawmakers are introducing bills to keep ICE away from the World Cup matches, and IOC members are already worrying about visas, access, and whether the U.S. can even make visitors feel welcome. That's not the kind of conversations a confident host country should be having.
And we have already seen this before. Trump sent ICE personnel into the Winter Olympics in Italy under the excuse of security support. Officials insisted they were not there to police the streets, but that almost misses the point. When an agency becomes globally associated with raids, crackdowns, and fear, well, people don't feel reassured just because you tell them, oh no, that's not happening.
America wants to host the world and promote peace while governing like a police state and revealing a place people increasingly have to think twice about actually entering.
And before anybody says, well, if you're doing nothing wrong, well, who cares? Oh, spare me. That is not how border power works. Canadian immigration lawyers have been warning that U.S. officials already have broad discretion, including around device searches and secondary screenings. Even if you're not doing anything wrong, you could easily miss your flight on your dime. Even if the rules on paper have not radically changed, the feeling has.
And that's the part that some Americans still don't get. Canadians are not boycotting the U.S. because we suddenly forgot how nice Chicago can be in the summer or how fun New York can be at Christmas. We all still love our American friends and family, but Canadians are pulling back because the basic trust in the government and MAGA supporters has been cracked. When the president talks about annexing your country, slaps tariffs on you for fun, and creates a fentanyl emergency just to punish your country, well, you know what? People start asking whether the cheap shopping trip is really actually worth it.
And sadly, the constant attacks are not just noise. They shape how people think. The more Trump degrades Canada in public, the more some Americans start to see us as a target instead of a neighbor. Because dehumanizing a neighbor does not start with tanks, it starts with language, with ridicule, with making disrespect feel normal. And that's why when Canadians hear Americans have a lower opinion of us than ever, well, we're not going to come and travel there.
Now, in a recent poll, Americans, they still mostly view Canada positively overall. So it's not really a story about 70% of Americans waking up and deciding that they hate us all of a sudden. It's more revealing than that. Gallup found views of Canada in the U.S. have dropped to the lowest level ever recorded. And among Republicans, the drop was especially sharp, so there's no surprise there. But that does tell you the relationship is fraying right where Trumpism has the strongest grip.
So the takeaway isn't that all Americans hate Canada, but it is that even Canada, of all countries, is no longer insulated from the political rot happening in the USA. If America can sour on Canadian people who did nothing but push back when Trump put illegal tariffs on a fair trade deal that he made, well, you know what? The bigger problem is way more than one trade spat.
And that mood shows up in travel first because airports are where states actually reveal themselves. Airports tell you whether a country is calm, confident, organized, and open, or whether it's tense, over-policed, underpaid, and improvising.
And humanity and empathy seem to be disappearing. Since the age of Trump, everyone tends to forget the human side of any story. 2 pilots are dead. One overworked air traffic controller's life is shattered.
So for ordinary viewers deciding whether to book a US trip, the question is not, is every American airport unsafe? Of course not. The better question is whether the margin of error in the United States feels thinner than it used to, whether the institutions look more brittle, whether the politics are now spilling directly into that travel experience. And on that, the answer is pretty clear to us. The answer is yes.
Now, none of these pieces alone explain everything, but together, they paint a picture of a country asking travelers to trust a machine that is visibly grinding to a halt.
So to our viewers out there, are you planning to travel to the USA anytime soon? Because nobody is morally obligated to spend money in a country that feels hostile, unstable, or needlessly stressful. And if Canadians decide they'd rather go to Europe, Mexico, Japan, Australia, or just stay home and see Canada, that's not anti-American hysteria. That's rational consumer behavior. People go where they feel welcome and feel safe. People don't need an official warning label when the entire country is starting to behave like one.
30 million visits a year. That's what Canadians used to give the American tourism economy. Hotels, restaurants, flights, border towns. We weren't just visitors, we were friends. And right now, Canada is deciding quietly, rationally, and not out of hysteria, whether that relationship still makes sense. So that's it for today, and if you want to support independent Canadian commentary, check the links in the pinned comment for the A-Team, the merch, the private Facebook group, and the Substack.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks it's all perfectly normal.
So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.